The rain started pouring heavily in the evening, turning the narrow streets of the small neighborhood into rivers of muddy water. The wind howled like a lost creature, rattling the tin roofs of the old houses and shaking the few weak trees that lined the streets. In one of those small, dimly lit houses, a poor girl lived with her mother. Their home was nothing more than a few wooden planks and old sheets patched together. Yet it was the only place they could call their own. The girl had spent most of the day doing small jobs, delivering parcels, cleaning houses, and running errands, just enough to earn a little money for food. She was tired, her body aching from the long hours of work. But she still had to look after her mother, who had been sick for months. As the storm grew stronger, the girl moved around their tiny home, trying to secure the few things they owned. The candles she had lit flickered with every gust of wind, making shadows dance across the cracked walls. The mother lay on a thin straw mat, shivering slightly, and the girl wrapped a thin blanket around her shoulders. She whispered comforting words, though she herself felt a wave of fear and worry. The storm was unlike anything she had seen before, and it made her feel helpless. Suddenly, she heard a knock at the door. It was soft at first, barely audible over the roar of the storm, but persistent enough to catch her attention. She hesitated, glancing at her mother, who looked worried. Who could be outside in this weather? Most people would stay safely indoors. Curiosity mixed with concern made her approach the door cautiously. Peeking through the small gap, she saw a young man standing there, drenched from head to toe, his clothes clinging to his body, and his face pale from the cold and exhaustion. His eyes were filled with desperation. Without thinking, the girl opened the door, and the storm immediately swept in, soaking her from head to toe. She quickly ushered him inside, closing the door against the wind. The stranger shivered violently, and the girl wrapped an old towel around him. She offered him a small wooden chair and motioned toward the corner where the fire used to be, though the flame had long since died out. With a few matches, she managed to light it again, and soon the small room was filled with the faint warmth of the fire. She noticed the cuts on his hands and arms, likely from trying to navigate through the storm, and quickly cleaned them with a piece of cloth and water she heated on the stove. The girl had very little medicine, only some old antiseptic cream, but she applied it carefully, hoping it would be enough. He thanked her quietly, his voice hoarse and low, barely audible over the rain. She smiled gently, saying it was nothing, even though inside her heart a mix of worry and pride swirled. She went to the small kitchen and prepared a simple meal, stale bread soaked in hot water with a little sugar. It wasn't much, but it was all she could give. The man ate slowly, his hands trembling from the cold, and she watched him carefully, making sure he did not choke or feel too weak. All through the night, she stayed awake, listening to the storm outside and occasionally glancing at him to see if he needed anything. Her mother slept lightly, comforted by the presence of another human being in the house. Though she did not know the stranger's story, hours passed, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. The girl's mind wandered as she worked quietly, thinking about how life had been so hard for them. They had nothing but each other, and yet she felt a strange warmth in her heart as she cared for this stranger. She had never helped anyone outside her family before, but something about his helplessness stirred compassion inside her. The girl realized that kindness did not need a reason, and even though they had very little, she could still give what she could. The man finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. He told her that he had been traveling, and the storm had caught him by surprise. He had nowhere to go, and for a moment he feared he would not survive the night. The girl listened quietly, nodding, and continued to bring him blankets and a little more warm water. She did not ask for his name, his story, or his wealth. All she wanted was to see him safe and warm. There was a sincerity in his eyes, a kind of gratitude that did not need words. It touched her deeply, and for the first time that night, she felt that her actions, small as they were, truly mattered. By midnight, the storm was at its peak. Rain lashed against the walls and the wind screamed through the gaps in the roof. The girl remained vigilant, checking the man's temperature, covering him with more blankets, and offering a sip of water whenever he shivered too much. She hardly noticed her own exhaustion, her body screaming for rest, because her mind was focused entirely on another person's safety. There was a strange sense of peace in the chaos, Amidst the storm and the fear, she realized that helping someone in need brought a kind of warmth and fulfillment she had never felt before. As the night went on, the storm slowly began to weaken, though the sky was still filled with dark clouds. The girl finally allowed herself a brief rest, sitting near the man and letting her head lean against the wall. She thought about the little things in life, the small meals, the simple joys, the acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. In her heart, she knew that she had done the right thing, even though it had been difficult and risky. She felt a connection with the stranger that went beyond words, a silent acknowledgement of human compassion in the face of adversity. The first light of dawn began to filter through the small cracks in the wooden walls. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet, wet world. The girl stretched, feeling the ache in her muscles, and looked around the room. The man was asleep, his breathing steady, and a sense of relief washed over her. She had survived the night, and more importantly, so had he. She prepared a little more warm water and cleaned up the small mess left behind by the storm. Outside, the neighborhood began to wake up, and she could hear the soft sounds of birds cautiously returning to the wet trees. Little did the girl know that this night, this simple act of kindness would change everything in ways she could never imagine. She had offered shelter, food, and warmth without expecting anything in return. And though she had no idea at the time, someone's life and hers was about to be forever altered because of a single, selfless act during a stormy night. The girl sat quietly looking out at the rain-soaked street, feeling a mix of exhaustion and hope, unaware that her life was on the brink of a remarkable transformation the morning after the storm. The girl woke up early, her body still aching from the night's labor. Sunlight barely reached through the small cracks in the walls, but it was enough to brighten the damp room. The man she had sheltered was asleep, curled up under the thin blanket she had given him. She quietly moved around the small house, trying not to wake him, as she wanted him to get some rest. Her mother had already begun to stir, coughing slightly, her weak frame barely lifting from the straw mat. The girl quickly prepared a little warm water and a simple breakfast for her mother, leaving the stranger for a few moments. Despite their poverty, she felt a sense of purpose that morning. Her heart was lighter than it had been in weeks. A strange feeling of hope after a night filled with worry and fear. Once her mother had eaten, she gently approached the stranger and whispered to wake him. He opened his eyes slowly, looking tired but alive. He thanked her again, a soft, genuine gratitude in his voice. The girl offered him more food and he ate slowly, savoring every bite. They spoke very little, mostly exchanging kind gestures and smiles. She noticed that, despite his worn and soaked clothes from the storm, there was something about him that seemed different, almost regal in his calm, quiet demeanor. She did not question it, nor did she need to. All she wanted was to ensure he was safe and comfortable after the meal. The girl helped the man clean up a little, providing fresh water and a towel. He admitted that he had no money to repay her and that he had nowhere to go after being stranded by the storm. The girl smiled gently, saying it didn't matter. She had given him shelter because it was the right thing to do. Her life had never been easy, and she understood the meaning of struggle. But kindness was something she had always valued above everything else. As she spoke, her mother watched quietly, a small smile on her tired face. The room, though small and sparse, seemed brighter because of this act of human connection. The man explained in fragments that he had been traveling for work, going from one city to another, but the storm had made him lose his way. He had been cold, hungry, and exhausted, and he feared he might not make it through the night. The girl listened carefully, occasionally offering him warm water or a small piece of bread. She did not ask for details about his work or his life beyond the storm. She only wanted him to know that someone cared, that someone had taken the time to see his pain and help him. The simplicity of her gestures and the sincerity in her voice made him feel a warmth he had not felt in years. Hours passed slowly. The storm had left the streets muddy and wet, and small puddles reflected the soft morning light. The man felt stronger, his shivering lessened, and he began to regain some color in his pale face. He looked at the girl, impressed by her selflessness, and asked why she had helped him when she had so little herself. She laughed softly, a sound of innocence and honesty. She told him that it did not matter what she had, only that she could help when someone needed it. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. For the man, it was a lesson he would never forget, that true kindness required no reward, no recognition, only the willingness to care. Throughout the morning, neighbors began to peek out of their houses. Curious about the strangers in the aftermath of the storm, the girl greeted them with her usual polite smile, though she could sense their quiet judgment. Some whispered about the man staying in her house, speculating about who he was and why he was there. The girl ignored their comments. She had always lived under the shadow of poverty and gossip, and she knew that people often misunderstood acts of goodness, especially when they came from someone they considered insignificant. Her focus remained on the man, ensuring he had enough to drink, enough rest, and that he felt safe before venturing outside by midday. The man felt strong enough to move around a little. He expressed a desire to leave, fearing that he was causing trouble or drawing unwanted attention. The girl insisted that he stay a little longer, not because she wanted anything from him, but because she understood the fragility of someone in need. She guided him carefully to sit by the small window, letting him look outside at the streets still soaked from the storm. As he observed the neighborhood, he noticed how humble and worn down the houses were, how the people lived their lives with quiet perseverance, and how the girl's actions were a beacon of hope in an otherwise hard world. He spoke of his gratitude again, but she brushed it away gently. Her mother chimed in, her voice weak but warm, praising the girl for her kindness. The room felt light, almost magical, as though the storm had cleansed not only the streets but also the hearts of those present. The man realized that the girl's small home, though humble, contained something far more valuable than wealth: a pure, selfless heart. It was a realization that stirred deep emotions within him, emotions he had long buried beneath the pressures of life, work, and responsibility. As the afternoon approached, the man finally decided to leave. He promised to find a way to repay her, though the girl shook her head, insisting that it was unnecessary. She had given him help freely, and that was enough. They walked to the small street together, the man now dressed in slightly drier clothes, and the girl ensured he reached the corner safely before disappearing into the remaining puddles of rainwater. He paused, looking back at the small, fragile house, and a thought struck him. In all his travels and experiences, he had never met anyone like her. A stranger, a poor girl, had shown him more humanity in a single night than he had seen in years. The girl returned inside, exhausted but content. Her mother smiled faintly, grateful for the safety of both the girl and the stranger. They did not speak much, but a silent understanding passed between them. That life, no matter how difficult, had moments of unexpected beauty. Little did the girl know, her simple act of kindness would ripple far beyond her understanding. The stranger would carry the memory of that night with him. It would change not only his life, but hers as well. Evening approached, and the girl prepared a small dinner. She reflected on the day, realizing how much difference a small act of care could make. She thought about the stranger, hoping he had reached a safe place, and felt a warmth in her heart. That night she slept peacefully, despite the ongoing drizzle outside, knowing that she had done the right thing. Unseen and unacknowledged by most, she had made a profound impact with nothing more than compassion, courage, and a willingness to help someone in need. The man, meanwhile, could not shake the image of the girl from his mind. He had encountered many people in his life, but none like her. Her selflessness, innocence, and courage struck him deeply. He began to reflect on the way he had lived his life, how he had allowed wealth, status, and cynicism to harden his heart. That night, he decided that the girl's kindness deserved more than gratitude. It deserved recognition and, if possible, reciprocation. He knew that this encounter was not mere coincidence. It was a turning point, a reminder that even in a harsh world, human kindness could shine brightly and alter destinies in unimaginable ways. The morning after the stranger left, the girl woke up to the quiet hum of the neighborhood slowly coming back to life. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a sky of soft gray clouds that reflected on the puddles covering the streets. She stepped outside for a brief moment, taking in the damp air and the sight of neighbors starting to clean their homes and streets. Life, it seemed, was returning to its usual rhythm. Yet she felt a strange sense of anticipation that she could not explain. Something in her heart whispered that her life was about to change. Though she did not yet understand how, she went about her morning routine, feeding her mother and tidying the small house as best as she could. The previous night's exhaustion still weighed heavily on her, but she felt energized by the memory of helping someone in need. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had offered warmth and safety when it mattered most. Little did she know her simple act of kindness had set events in motion that would be far beyond her imagination. She thought about the stranger, hoping he had reached safety. Unaware that his influence in her life was just beginning, by mid-morning she noticed something unusual. The streets that had been mostly empty and silent after the storm were now filled with unfamiliar activity. Several large, shiny cars slowly rolled into the neighborhood. Their polished surfaces reflected the morning light, and they seemed out of place among the small, worn-down houses and muddy streets. At first, she assumed it was merely a coincidence, or perhaps wealthy visitors passing through. But the more she looked, the more peculiar it felt. The cars did not move past the neighborhood. Instead, they began to surround her home in an almost deliberate manner. Curiosity mixed with unease as she watched from her doorway. Neighbors began gathering quietly, whispering among themselves and pointing at the unusual vehicles. Their eyes were wide with surprise, and some shook their heads, clearly confused by the sudden appearance of so many luxurious cars. The girl felt her heart beat faster, unsure of what was happening. She had never seen such a display in her neighborhood before. Her life had always been simple and quiet, filled with struggles that were familiar and expected, not sudden surprises like this. Suddenly, a man in a sharp suit stepped out of one of the cars and approached her cautiously. He carried an air of importance and confidence, yet there was a softness in his eyes that suggested respect. She stepped back, unsure of why he was here or what he wanted. He smiled gently, speaking in a calm, deliberate voice, thanking her for her kindness the night before. The girl blinked in disbelief, realizing that this man was the stranger she had helped during the storm. She had not expected to see him again, and certainly not in such a dramatic way. He explained that the storm had not just been an ordinary event for him. He was a wealthy businessman, someone who had been traveling for urgent matters. His life had been complicated and filled with challenges that the girl could scarcely imagine. The night of the storm had left him stranded and vulnerable, and he had been deeply touched by her selfless act. In all his experiences, he had encountered many people, but none had shown genuine compassion without expecting anything in return. Her actions had left a lasting impression on him, and he wanted to express his gratitude in a way that was meaningful and visible. The girl listened quietly, overwhelmed by the reality of the situation. She had never imagined that helping a stranger could lead to such recognition. Despite her initial hesitation and the simplicity of her home and life, the man's words carried a weight that she could not ignore. He spoke about how rare it was to meet someone so pure of heart, someone who offered kindness without expecting reward or fame. She felt a strange mix of pride and humility, unsure how to respond, but deeply moved nonetheless as the day progressed. More people emerged from the cars, offering smiles, greetings, and gestures of respect. They brought small gifts, food, and supplies, acknowledging the girl's bravery and kindness. She was astonished, unable to comprehend the attention. Her neighbors watched in amazement, many of them whispering about how a simple act of goodness had brought such unexpected recognition. The girl, however, remained grounded, focused not on the attention or gifts, but on the fact that she had helped someone in need. The validation was overwhelming, but it was not what mattered most to her. The man continued to explain how her selflessness had inspired him. He spoke of how often people acted out of fear, greed, or self-interest, and how rare it was to find someone whose actions were guided purely by empathy. Her courage in inviting him into her home during a dangerous storm, despite her own hardships, had reminded him of the true meaning of humanity. He wanted her to understand that her life, though simple and filled with struggle, held immense value. The girl listened, absorbing his words and reflecting on her own journey. Her hardships had never diminished her capacity for kindness. And now, unexpectedly, they had become a source of recognition and respect. By afternoon, the scene outside her home had drawn the attention of more neighbors, and even a few passersby. People began asking questions. Intrigued by the unusual display of luxury cars and the apparent importance of the man who had emerged from one of them, she answered politely, though she felt a bit nervous about the growing crowd. Despite the attention, she remained composed. Her thoughts centered on the principle that had guided her actions: kindness without expectation. It was a lesson she had learned through hardship, and now she saw its impact not only on the stranger's life, but on her own. Throughout the day, the man continued to express his gratitude, ensuring that she and her mother were comfortable and safe. He offered assistance, but she politely declined, emphasizing that she had helped because it was right, not because she expected anything in return. His eyes reflected understanding and respect, acknowledging the strength and humility she had shown. He assured her that her life would be supported in ways that could help her family, her education, and her well-being. Yet he did so without demanding anything from her in return. It was an offer born of appreciation, not obligation. As the day drew to a close, the neighborhood had become unusually lively, with conversations and whispers spreading about the events that had unfolded. People who had once overlooked the girl now looked at her with admiration. The girl, however, remained calm, understanding that her worth was not measured by the attention she received, but by the integrity and compassion she carried within her. She reflected on the night of the storm, the fear, the responsibility, and the choice she had made to help someone in need. That choice, made with no expectation, had led to a moment of transformation, a turning point that would forever alter her life. Evening arrived, and the sun dipped low, casting a golden hue across the wet streets. The man prepared to leave, ensuring that she had everything she needed for herself and her mother. He reminded her that her actions had a ripple effect, inspiring not only him but also those around her. The girl watched as the cars departed, leaving her and her mother in a quiet, reflective moment. She understood that life could change in an instant, and sometimes the smallest acts carried the greatest impact. That night, she slept with a heart full of hope and a sense of purpose that had never existed before. Unaware of the further surprises and transformations that lay ahead in her journey, the next morning, the girl woke up to an unusual calmness. The sun shone gently through the cracks in the walls, and the streets outside, though still wet from the storm, were bustling with quiet activity. She noticed something strange immediately. Several of the shiny cars from the previous day were parked nearby, their presence still unusual in her modest neighborhood. A soft murmur had started spreading among the neighbors, their whispers carrying a mixture of curiosity and amazement. The girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, unsure what to expect next. Her mother, sitting on the straw mat, noticed her unease and asked if something was wrong. The girl shook her head and smiled softly, telling her mother that she thought the stranger might return. She did not know why she felt it so strongly, only that a part of her heart believed the story was not yet finished. She began her morning chores, preparing a simple breakfast and tidying the small house, all the while glancing out the window at the growing crowd outside. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and she could sense it, though she had no idea what form it would take. By mid-morning, the man she had helped appeared again, stepping out of one of the luxurious cars with a calm, confident smile. He was followed by a few assistants, each carrying small gifts and supplies. The girl froze for a moment, unable to believe her eyes. The stranger, who had been cold, exhausted, and vulnerable just a day ago, now stood before her as a figure of importance and presence. He smiled warmly, greeting her politely, and thanked her once again for her selfless act. The girl, still surprised, responded softly, insisting that it had been nothing. Her actions, though small in her eyes, touched someone deeply. The man then spoke to her in more detail, explaining who he was and the challenges he faced before that fateful stormy night. He described how isolated he often felt, traveling from place to place, dealing with pressure and responsibilities that few could understand. He admitted that he had almost lost hope in human kindness until he encountered her. Her willingness to help, despite having so little, had restored his faith in people. Her courage, empathy, and selflessness were qualities that he valued far above wealth or power, and he wanted to honor that in every possible way as he spoke. He carefully handed over a small bundle of supplies to the girl, including food, clothes, and other essentials for her and her mother. She thanked him, but politely refused any notion of repayment, explaining that she had acted out of pure compassion. The man understood and smiled, acknowledging her humility. He then turned to the gathered neighbors, quietly introducing her as someone extraordinary. A girl whose simple act of kindness had created ripples that extended far beyond their small community. The neighbors looked on in awe, many of them whispering about how the girl's courage and generosity had changed not only the stranger's life, but also brought honor and recognition to their neighborhood. The girl watched quietly, feeling overwhelmed by the scene unfolding before her. She had never experienced such attention or admiration. Her life had always been simple, filled with daily struggles and little joy, yet here she was, surrounded by people who respected and admired her actions. She realized that her choice to help someone in need, despite her circumstances, had created an impact far beyond what she could have imagined. She felt a sense of pride and humility all at once, a mixture of emotions she had never felt before. The man then shared that he wanted to ensure her future and her mother's well-being. He offered to help with medical care for her mother, access to better education for the girl, and opportunities that could change the course of their lives. He explained that this was not charity, but a gesture of gratitude and recognition for the extraordinary courage she had shown. The girl, though initially hesitant, accepted, understanding that this offer was genuine and rooted in appreciation, not obligation. Her life, once limited by poverty and struggle, was suddenly filled with possibilities she had never imagined. Throughout the day, the man spent time with the girl and her mother, ensuring they were comfortable and understood the support being offered. He shared stories of his travels, the people he had met, and the challenges he had faced. The girl listened with rapt attention, absorbing not just the words, but the lessons embedded within them. She realized that her life, though humble, held immense potential. Her kindness had created a bridge between two worlds, the one she had always known and the new world of opportunities and hope. As the afternoon passed, the neighborhood became lively with conversations and admiration. Neighbors approached the girl, offering congratulations and expressing amazement at her bravery and selflessness. She responded with simple, gracious words, emphasizing that anyone could act kindly if they chose to, and that her actions were nothing extraordinary in her eyes. Her humility and sincerity only increased the respect and admiration from those around her. The girl realized that her life was changing not because of wealth or recognition, but because of the values she had always held dear: compassion, courage, and integrity. By evening, the man prepared to leave, but not before making sure that the girl and her mother were settled with the support and resources they would need. He reminded her that her actions had created a lasting impact, not only on his life, but on the lives of everyone who witnessed the events. The girl watched as the luxurious cars slowly disappeared from the neighborhood, leaving behind a sense of awe and gratitude. She understood that life could shift dramatically in a single moment, and that small acts performed with sincerity and courage could create a legacy that would be remembered. The girl and her mother sat together that night, reflecting on the day's events. They spoke quietly, sharing their thoughts and feelings, and acknowledging how much had changed in such a short time. The girl felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her heart had guided her correctly. She understood that true value was measured not by wealth, attention, or recognition, but by the choices one made when faced with challenges. That night, she slept with a heart full of hope and determination, aware that her life had entered a new chapter, one filled with opportunities, lessons, and the enduring power of kindness. The morning after the man had left, the girl woke up with a strange mix of excitement and calmness. Her mind wandered over the events of the past days, trying to grasp what had truly happened. The storm, the stranger, and the unexpected arrival of luxury cars all seemed like parts of a dream she could hardly believe. She went about her morning chores, feeding her mother and cleaning the small house. But her thoughts were constantly drawn to the stranger's visit and the promise of support he had offered. There was a quiet anticipation in the air, a feeling that her life was no longer confined to the narrow streets and simple routines she had always known. As the day progressed, the girl noticed that her neighborhood seemed subtly different. Neighbors moved with curiosity and respect, their whispers carrying admiration for her bravery and kindness. The girl, however, remained grounded. She continued her daily work, helping her mother, tidying their small home, and running errands, yet she felt the world had grown larger and more filled with possibilities. Her actions, though simple and unplanned, had created ripples that extended beyond her understanding. By midday, there was another visit from the stranger. This time, he came not alone, but with a few of his trusted associates. They carried parcels filled with supplies, food, and small gifts for her and her mother. The girl was taken aback by the thoughtfulness, but she remained polite and calm, insisting that her actions required no reward. The man smiled, acknowledging her humility, and explained that his purpose was not charity, but gratitude. Her courage and selflessness had made a profound impact on him, and he wished to ensure that she and her mother had the support and resources they deserved. He shared that he had often felt isolated, traveling from one place to another and dealing with challenges that few could understand. Meeting her had reminded him of the essence of humanity: compassion without expectation, courage without recognition, and kindness without calculation. Her willingness to help a stranger during a dangerous storm had rekindled something he thought he had lost: a belief in the goodness of people. Her actions had inspired him deeply, and he wanted her to know that she had not only helped him survive physically, but had also touched his heart in a way that he would never forget. Throughout the day, the man engaged in conversations with the girl and her mother, explaining how he intended to help them. He offered medical care for her mother, assistance in continuing her education, and guidance for future opportunities that could change their lives. The girl, cautious but hopeful, accepted the support, understanding that this was not a favor, but a genuine gesture of appreciation. She felt a sense of empowerment. Realizing that her choices and actions had created real change in the world around her, neighbors gathered quietly, observing the interactions with amazement. They had seen the transformation that the stranger's arrival had brought, but they were also witnessing the humility and grace of the girl who had initiated it all. Some whispered about how rare it was to find someone so pure-hearted, especially in a world often dominated by fear, greed, and selfishness. The girl listened politely to their words, but her mind was focused on the practical matters at hand, ensuring her mother's comfort, organizing the gifts and supplies, and reflecting on the significance of what had transpired. By evening, the man prepared to leave once again, making sure that everything was in place for the girl and her mother to live comfortably and securely. He reminded her that her actions had created a lasting impact, not just on him, but on the community around them. She understood the gravity of his words. One small act of kindness had set off a chain of events that would affect countless lives, including her own. The girl felt a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose, realizing that even ordinary people with limited means could create extraordinary change through compassion and courage. After the visitors left, the girl and her mother sat together quietly, reflecting on the past days. They spoke about the storm, the stranger, and the remarkable events that had unfolded. The mother expressed her pride in her daughter, marveling at her courage and heart. The girl listened, feeling warmth and gratitude, not for the recognition or gifts, but for the realization that her actions had true meaning. She understood that life could change in an instant, and that the choices she made in moments of challenge could define not only her own destiny, but also influence the lives of others. In the following days, the girl continued her routine, but with a renewed sense of hope and confidence. She pursued her education more seriously, encouraged by the support she'd received, and helped her mother access better medical care. The community around her also began to change subtly, inspired by her actions and the recognition she had received. People started treating each other with more kindness, understanding that small gestures could have significant impacts. The girl witnessed the power of compassion firsthand, and she carried this lesson deeply in her heart. As weeks turned into months, the girl's life gradually transformed. She gained opportunities that were previously unimaginable, met new people who supported her growth, and continued to help those in need around her. The stranger remained a figure of guidance and encouragement, occasionally checking in to ensure that she and her mother were well. Their bond, though unexpected, became a lasting connection built on mutual respect and gratitude. The girl realized that her simple act of kindness during a storm had not only changed her own fate, but had also sown seeds of goodness in others' hearts. Years later, the girl would look back on that stormy night with a sense of wonder and gratitude. It was a night when fear and uncertainty had been met with courage and compassion. It was a night when one person's humanity had sparked change in the life of another, leading to a series of events that reshaped her future. She had learned that true strength lay not in wealth, status, or recognition, but in the ability to care, to act with empathy, and to remain selfless, even in difficult circumstances. That lesson, forged in the chaos of a storm, became the guiding principle of her life. The girl's story became known in her community and beyond, not as a tale of luck or fortune, but as a testament to the power of kindness. People admired her not for what she had received, but for what she had given without expectation. Her life, once marked by struggle and limitation, became a symbol of hope and inspiration. The storm had passed, but its lessons endured, shaping her character, her choices, and the legacy she would leave behind as she grew older. The girl continued to act with compassion, helping strangers and neighbors, teaching her mother's lessons, and living a life guided by empathy and courage. She understood that every small act of kindness had the potential to ripple through the world, creating connections and transformations that were impossible to measure. Her fate, once uncertain and constrained, had been forever changed by a single night of selflessness, proving that even the smallest gestures could alter the course of lives in ways beyond imagination. Years had passed since that stormy night, yet the memory of it remained vivid in the girl's mind. She had grown into a young woman, strong and confident, with a heart still full of kindness and empathy. The lessons of her past, especially the night she had sheltered the stranger, had become the foundation of her character. She understood that life could change in an instant, and that the choices she made, even small ones, carried the power to shape her future and the lives of others. Her mother, now healthier thanks to the support she had received, often marveled at her daughter's resilience. Together, they had built a modest home, more secure and comfortable than the small, fragile house of her childhood. Yet, despite these improvements, the girl never lost sight of her humble beginnings. She continued to live simply, working diligently and helping others in her community whenever she could. Her reputation for kindness and generosity had grown over the years. People often sought her advice, comfort, and support. One morning, she received an unexpected letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and the envelope was thick and elegant. She opened it carefully, and inside was an invitation to meet the man she had helped years ago. He had become a respected figure in business circles, but he had never forgotten the girl who had shown him compassion during a night of despair. He wanted to reconnect, not for his benefit, but to see how her life had unfolded and to express his continued gratitude. The girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never imagined that their paths would cross again in such a formal way, yet a part of her heart felt ready for it. When they met, the man greeted her warmly, his expression filled with genuine happiness. He had followed her journey from afar, hearing about her successes, her growth, and her ongoing acts of kindness. He spoke about how that night had changed his perspective, reminding him that true wealth was measured not in money or power, but in the ability to care for others and act with integrity. The girl listened attentively, feeling a deep connection that transcended time and circumstance. They talked for hours, sharing stories, lessons, reflections on life. The man shared that he had used his influence to create opportunities not only for the girl, but also for many others in the neighborhood. He had established scholarships, community programs, and healthcare initiatives, all inspired by her courage and selflessness. The girl was amazed by the ripple effect of a single act of kindness. She realized that her choices, though seemingly small, had ignited change on a scale she could never have imagined. Her heart swelled with pride, yet she remained humble, knowing that the true reward lay in the lives she had touched. Over the following weeks, the girl and the man collaborated on projects that aimed to uplift those in need. They worked together to provide resources for education, medical care, and skill development. The girl found joy in seeing the immediate impact of their efforts, the smiles of children learning to read, families receiving medical attention, and young adults gaining skills to improve their lives. She understood that her compassion, once offered to a single stranger, had grown into a force that could transform entire communities as she continued her work. The girl reflected on her own growth. She had faced poverty, fear, and uncertainty, yet she had never allowed those circumstances to harden her heart. Her experiences had taught her resilience, empathy, and the importance of acting with integrity. She realized that life was not about avoiding challenges, but about responding to them with courage and kindness. Every struggle had shaped her, every act of compassion had multiplied, and every choice had led her closer to the person she had become. One evening, as she walked through the neighborhood she had always called home, she noticed familiar faces smiling and greeting her warmly. Children waved, neighbors nodded in respect, and even strangers offered gestures of appreciation. She felt a profound sense of connection and belonging. Understanding that her actions had fostered a community built on empathy and mutual support, the girl knew that the impact of her kindness would continue to grow, touching lives in ways she could not foresee. Later, she sat with her mother, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. They spoke of the storm, the stranger, and the transformations that had followed. Her mother expressed pride in her daughter, praising her unwavering compassion and courage. The girl listened, feeling warmth and gratitude, not just for the recognition, but for the opportunity to live a life guided by values she held dear. She understood that her story was not only about personal success, but about the power of selfless actions to create lasting change in the years that followed. The girl continued to dedicate herself to helping others, establishing community centers, mentoring young people, and providing aid where it was most needed. Her life had become a testament to the enduring power of kindness and courage. She often recalled the stormy night, the stranger she had sheltered, and the chain of events that had transformed her fate. That night had taught her that even the smallest acts, performed with sincerity, could ripple through the world, creating opportunities, hope, and lasting impact. As she grew older, the girl became a symbol of hope and inspiration for her community. People admired her not for the wealth or recognition she had gained, but for the choices she had made, the compassion she had shown, and the courage she had displayed. Her life was a reminder that true strength lies not in possessions or power, but in the ability to care, to act selflessly, and to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. The girl knew that her journey had begun with a simple act of kindness during a stormy night, and that act had forever shaped her destiny and the lives of countless others in her quiet moments. She often reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the lessons learned, the lives touched, and the legacy she was building. Her heart remained humble, yet strong, and she understood that the power of empathy, courage, and integrity could never be underestimated. The storm had passed, but its lessons had endured, guiding her every step and ensuring that her life, once defined by struggle, was now defined by purpose, compassion, and the ability to inspire others to act with kindness in their own lives.